Hey everybody, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire and here on the Dice Tower. And I'm here with a special guest, Travis Hill. How are you doing tonight, Travis?
Hello. I have coffee, and yes.
Yeah.
I'm doing well.
What more does a person need in life, right? We got this. Yeah,
I set a reminder on my phone that 20 minutes before I needed to make a cup of coffee, and so so I'm good now.
Very well done. Yeah, I can't drink coffee at night or else I won't sleep, and then it's just a problem.
My wife is that way, but I am indiscriminate. It doesn't matter. I will drink this for the next 2 hours, and then I will go to sleep, and I just crash. Yeah.
My boyfriend makes fun of me because there was one day that I had way too much caffeine. Like, I drink, espresso drinks in the morning and it's fine. But one day I had, an afternoon, couple of cappuccinos or something. And he was like, man, I'm going to have to get you off the ceiling with a spatula. Just
Yeah, fair.
So why don't you tell our audience what you've been up to? I know that you've had some exciting Kickstarter experiences recently.
Yeah. So I feel like I do a lot, and it wasn't on purpose. I mean, I started off just playing games, and then a good friend of mine, a couple of friends of mine, we decided to do Low Player Count podcast, and that went great for 4.5 years, but in the middle of that, I started doing rulebook editing. With Paul Grogan from Gaming Rules. We kind of worked on a bunch of stuff together, and then I started branching out and doing freelance stuff, and then Low Player Count kind of went away because a billion things happened kind of all over the span of 6 months, and there's a thing that you kind of need to start realizing, it's time to call it, and this was the time to call it. And then in the middle of all of that, I decided, you know what, I want to get into game design, and so I love all different types of games, and I love all sorts of weird stuff, but I was like, I'm not going to design a 3-hour heavy Euro game. That's not my thing. I like playing them, but I'm not going to sit around and actually design one because that involves balancing things, I guess. I don't know, whatever, right? And so all of that has kind of culminated to right now I'm doing 3 things. I'm doing a lot of rulebook editing still. I'm doing weird independent RPG designs, which are things that I'm typically putting out on Kickstarter. And then I'm designing Cube Rails games, like Chicago Express, Paris Connection, Irish Gauge, stuff of that ilk. So I'm kind of just playing and tinkering with things a little bit as we go because it's fun.
As you should. So, actually, I've just downloaded the PDF. I've not played yet. But talk to us a bit about your quirky solo RPG collection. There's one that's not solo, if I recall, in the table.
Yeah. One of the 5 is not solo. It'd be weird to play solo.
How dare you?
So, I know. I'm trying. Had to reach out to someone. Something different crowd. So, I've been a couple of years ago, year and a half ago, I kickstarted. Let me rewind here. Kickstarter about 2 years ago said that they wanted independent RPG designers to put together RPG zines, right? And so the original RPGs, all through the 70s and 80s, a lot of them came out in this, in a zine format, right? So it's a booklet, folded in half, single colored, 28 pages in it, stapled, and then you just put it in the mail and then you go. And so they wanted to they wanted to set aside a month so that RPG designers could put this stuff out. And so a good friend of mine, Matthew Gravelin, he's done a lot of our RPG design stuff as well, and we just kind of talked, and I was like, man, I have a couple of ideas for stuff, and I ran some ideas past him, and he was like, dude, Travis, you should just go with it. And so I did. So I played around, did some stuff, tossed it out on Kickstarter. It went very well. It funded, and I sent out a couple hundred copies, and I was like, this is cool. And so in my mind, I was like, I don't want to do this full time. I don't want to do this all the time, but it might be neat maybe once or twice a year to put something out like this. And so 6 months later, my buddy Donnie and I, we sat down and we put together. Kickstarter had another campaign, not for zines, but it was called Break Kickstarter was the idea, and it was just kind of like break the mold of what a normal Kickstarter campaign would be. And so I put together this campaign called Chainmail, and it was a letter writing. It was a letter writing game that you would actually write the next part of a story. It's a story, right? So you're telling a story and you're just adding on to what the person before you wrote. And so that's what it was, and it was
Cool.
based off of genres. So there were 5 different genres that people could pick from. And that worked out mostly okay. The United States Postal Service lost a few of the packages. Surprisingly, this was very surprising for me. There were people who would actually like get the package and would go, cool, I'll deal with this later, and would set it to the side, and it would be like 3 or 4 weeks. And so it was this chain package that I was only going to go through 10 people. That's it. But the fact that I sent them out in September, and from September to December, some of them had only made it to the second person, and then things got lost or whatever, and people like literally wouldn't respond back to any emails that I sent. I mean, it was just a nightmare of a right. And so in January, I said, screw it, we're going digital. And so we did. So I put everything in Google Docs, and only one person was like, you know what? I don't feel comfortable in Google Docs. And I'm like, hey, man, however you want to do it, let's just make it happen. And I felt bad because the idea was it was supposed to be this tangential, man, I've been working
Tactile?
on that, right? Tactile.
There we go.
I don't know words, I promise. But it was
Yes, you do.
Tangential. That's over there, right? So thank you. But it was this tactile thing. If you get it and you wrote it and you sent it off to the next person, and I was like super low back end level. It was like $2 to do it because like you're paying 55 cents to mail the package off, right? And so that's what I was doing. And it just totally it was great. The stories came out wonderful eventually, but it was like March. It was like I think mid-March, early March was whenever I finally was able to deliver all of them, which I know sounds like a super short time in Kickstarter terms, but for me, like I want the stuff ready to be printed whenever it's done, whenever it's funded, and so I could just hit the print button and go. And so then Kickstarter put out another, the second year of Zine Quest is what it was called. They did a second year back in February, and I put one out for that, and it went okay. And then I delivered in mid-March this multiplayer game on a heavy topic of RPGs. I delivered it mid-March, and something happened mid-March that didn't allow people to interact with one another in person. I don't know what it was, but it was this thing that's still happening now. And so because of that, it went out and people were like, oh, this is really neat, but I have nobody to play with. And I was just like, huh, okay. And so like you, I'm in education. And so there was this massive amount of stress until the second week of June for us. And then after the second week of June, I was able to breathe a little bit again. And so right around that time, I started thinking like my creativity happens in bursts, and I'll have a few months of really creative time, and then I'll spend the next few months just kind of working on it. Mm-hmm. So at the beginning of June, whenever I was finally able, I'm one of the people that I get to read names off of graduation. And so that's always like my last thing that I have to do every single school year is, I got to the Z's and I'm done. And now I get to go on summer break. Right. And so that happened. So I read off the Z's and I got home, and then like literally the next day I sat down and I started thinking, man, what if I put together some of like my small RPGs that I've done, like just like really small, like they're only 3 or 4 pages long. They're predominantly solitaire, but I like weird stuff. and I like games that are not fantasy games in terms of RPGs. I like playing them, but in the design space, there's just so much of them.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much sci-fi, there's so much fantasy, there's so much whatever horror. I love all those genres, but I don't want to make that because everybody's making that, and I'm counterculture anyways. And so if I'm going to do it, then I want to go off to the side. And so I started thinking, and I was like, you know what? I've designed some, and I've like picked at a few, and I have a lot of notes. Like I have a lot of I had a number of games that were probably 30 to 70% finished that I really just needed to sit down and do it. So in a mad dash, literally 1 or 2 days after we got out of school, I sat down and I went, hey, I'm going to make these. And I came up with 5 of the games that I had, and I compiled them all together. And I am pretty adept at InDesign. I'm not amazing at Photoshop and InDesign, but I'm pretty good at it. I'm enough to get by. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to put it into compilation. I'll have 5 of them. 4 of them will be solo. One of them is going to be 2-player, but you can still play it remotely if you want to. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a zine. I'm going to put it in an envelope. I'm going to put a stamp on it, and it's just going to go, and that's it. Like I'm not going to overthink this. I'm not going to add any other components. And so these are games that like I've thought through and I've worked through and I've play tested before. And so I just like in this kind of fervor over the span of about 72 hours, I put together all of these games, got them to like a 90% state, and started putting them in InDesign. And then I ran them back and forth with a bunch of friends, and I said, okay, hey, what? And then I started thinking, like, well, I guess I could put this up on Kickstarter. That would be cool, because it's just a little A6 size zine, so it's like 4 by 5 inches. And I was like, man, that'd be really neat if I did that. And I could put it for like a super low funding level. I might have 100 people that back the campaign, and then I'll just send it out, and ta-da, that's done. And then I go back to work, and I was like, this is like a nice creative venture for me and something to do over summer. And so that was like the long impetus of making this zine compilation called Our Innermost Thoughts, because a lot of it's self-reflective, a lot of it is like personal and finding your passion and things and there are questions that you ask yourself that you normally wouldn't ask yourself, and those are the types of things that I like. So that's all of it. That's what happened, and I put it out. And I put it on Kickstarter, and it skyrocketed in ways that this dinky little zine. It just ended up being this thing that like beyond anything that I ever thought before, which was super encouraging at the, but also equally like it got to a point around backer 400 that I was thinking, am I going to be able to do all of these? Am I going to be able to like put all of these in envelopes and get them out? And then I had to like actually print labels because I was going to handwrite stuff. I was like, it's only going to be like 100, which, I mean, the good thing is that with the economy of scale, I mean, it didn't matter, really. But yeah, it was a wild thing that happened.
That's awesome. So I'm sure there'll be more questions about that, but our first question from a commenter is actually about rulebooks. So Fred Perro wants to know, Travis, how important are indexes for rulebooks, and how difficult are they to include?
Oh yeah. Index. So, oh man. So a lot of it depends on, for me personally, a lot of it depends on what type of game that we're going for, right? If it is a game, first of all, it has to be a larger game overall, and so whenever we're talking about indexes, so you have your index and you have your glossary, and those are the things that you get a lot of people that's what they initially respond back with, like, hey, what about an index or a glossary? Glossary obviously is just going to be a definition of terms that's going to be in the back of the book. Index is going to be where you find the first or the multiple times all those terms show up, and so they're going to be used really differently, right? A lot of war games, you'll see glossaries. Mm-hmm. You'll see a definition of terms in the back of the book. I think that's fine. I think that's fine. I think it also depends, once again, on the size of the game. I mean, if it is If it is a 32, 40-page rulebook, yes, please give me a glossary. But I've only been a part of one project that had an index, and that was the first edition of John Company with Cole Worley.
Yeah.
Right? We talked about it, and at one point, like, we were probably about 90% of the way through the project, and he goes, "Travis, I just really think we need an index." And I was like, okay. It's like, you don't want a glossary? Because every Sierra Madre game has a glossary. And he was just like, no, I don't want to do a glossary. Because, like, the terms are defined well within the space. But what I want people to be able to reference back, because that's one of the big things that we get a lot about rulebooks. Rulebooks are either great to learn and teach, but they're terrible to reference.
Ooh.
Or they're terrible to learn and teach, or they're very easy to reference. Like, I love Uwe Rosenberg games, and if I ever need to find anything in Feast for Odin or Fields of Arl, it's out of luck, because I have to flip through every single page and look at every single page and go. But Cole, because John Company was really the first kind of game of its ilk, I mean, sort of Rome, right? But that's where a lot of the ideas were originally based on. But so much of it was kind of new, and it was this weird space that you had to navigate with other people. That he really wanted to have an index, so that if there were, because it's a sweet looking rule book, but the problem with it is that there's a lot of words in that rule book, and so he wanted to find a way that you could reference it. So I think indexes are great, but not everything needs an index whatsoever. If you have an 8-page rule book, if you have a 12-page rule book, nah. But it also, once again, it depends on the quantity of terms that you have.
True.
All of that, and I'm also a big fan of don't make too many terms. If your game is entirely based off terms, then I mean, it's gonna be hard to learn and hard to remember everything. That's a whole other discussion right there.
Ooh, all right. So Roy Kennedy is in the chat. Hi, Roy. He wants to know, what is the most important thing when designing for solo play?
Oh,
we both have opinions about this, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna get a very different response for every single solo gamer and solo game designer. So the hard part is that there are people that feel people feel very different about this. I don't need an AI. I don't need a bot. I don't need a deck of cards that I have to go through. I am perfectly content trying to beat my high score 100% of the way through. I don't need to have, if you want to give me a range, like the first time I saw this was in Nations. Nations had in the solo play of Nations, they had, if you hit this range to this range, then you are a king or a queen. If you hit this range to this range, you're an emperor or whatever it was. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I don't need that necessarily. And I track all my plays of games, but I still don't sit there and go, oh man, I only made 380 points on Aura and Labora last time. For me, it's all about playing into space, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of that translates over to solo game design. Now, whenever I do solo game design, you also have to keep in mind and just remember that the only solo game stuff that I've ever done is all role-playing games. And so even though I love solo gaming, I haven't designed a solo game that is like a Euro or a war game, even though things like that are kind of on the docket over here in my design journal.
Okay.
Solo war game is just like, that's where I'm going. That's where I want to go eventually, but I have to have like brain space for that. And right now with school starting, I have no brain space for that. In grad school, I'm starting grad school in 2 weeks. So
congrats.
zero space for that. Thank you.
Congrats, and I'm sorry.
It's gonna be great. We got my wife through grad school. She got her librarianship degree, and so now she gets to go do all that fun stuff. And so now that she's done and out, it's like, okay, Travis, it's your turn. So, and we were at a place to do so.
Nice.
So,
nice.
So for me, with solo play, I really want something that is introspective. Whenever it comes to RPG play, I want something that's introspective. I want something that's self-reflective. I want something that makes you think. And I think part of that comes from my desire to play Euro games solo and being perfectly fine just hitting a high score, because I like playing in this space. And so for me, whenever it comes to solo game design, I want to be able to play in this space. I don't want the space to fully dictate where I'm going. And so because of that, I want to have agency to make decisions that can totally alter the shape of the game. And so I want to be able to give that to anybody who plays any of my solo work. I want them to have the capacity to, you know what, I get to make this decision, and I'm going to continue this path, even though it might not be the best path. That's not what it's about. It's about exploration. That's why it's like I don't have win conditions in anything that I make, because one, it's not like we're going and taking down the big bad boss, the giant orc lord at the end of the dungeon, which is fun in a cooperative game or in a movie or a book, but that's just not stuff that I like to do. So it's weird because since I don't do like traditional board game design for solo work, it comes across a little different. Now, obviously, in play, I'm on board for just like let's just see if you can win or not, right? And you get that a lot with war games as well. And I just like hard stuff. I like hard war games that just kind of like pummel you. That it gets to the point where you're like, do I even really want to continue playing this game because this is my 12th time and I'm not going to win? But really, that's not what it's about. It's about the experience. Right.
It's also about enjoying pain. No, I'm kidding. I don't totally disagree with you. I'm also kind of an omni gamer for solo. I'll play anything, and I think that's especially important for me. I review solo games. I like the full range for the most part if it's well executed. The only thing that I find myself falling into with the beat your own score ones is I like them, but I will eventually tire of them if I find myself doing the same opening moves over and over again. So like with something like Agricola, like I ended up trading off because it was like I don't play it with anyone, and I kept doing the same stuff over and over and over in the early parts of the game, and it felt like my first several years were like mapped out for me.
That does make sense though. I mean, there kind of is, and especially games that have no variation, especially at the beginning of the game. There are kind of like those standard openers.
Yeah, and so that I don't like. But something like Welcome To, I like the Alexis Solo mode best, but I don't mind playing it just to beat my own score. Something like Cartographers, no problem. I really enjoy trying to go for that high score. It's no different from playing a phone game, except that it's maybe more relaxing because you're not getting notifications and it doesn't keep you awake till 3 a.m.
Yeah. Just sit there scrolling, laying in bed, falling on your face.
Oh man, did you remember when 2048 was big?
Oh yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah, I download that probably once a year, easily, and I'll download it once a year and I'll just play it, and I'm like, haha, that's cool. All right, I'm done.
I remember I was traveling a lot that summer. Every transport time ever, boop, doop, 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 doop. And actually, I love video games. I have to be careful about how much I play them because, I went to Skyrim and I came back out 2 months later.
And, fair.
I have to be really careful. So board gaming, I can stop. I can quit whenever I want. It matters.
Yeah. Says the content creator.
I prefer media, thank you. All right. Fred Perro has a question. Travis, do you have any board gaming tattoos? He also has the same question to Roy, but Roy says no already.
No board gaming tattoos. I have a lot of tattoos, but not board games.
Would you ever get one? I actually just sort of curious about this now.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's I don't know. It's weird. Like I like meeples, but I'm not gonna get a meeple tattooed on me. Um, I like train games. I might get a train tattooed on me, but I don't. That doesn't have like a direct correlation to me enjoying economic games. Yeah. No, I just kind of. There's a joke in the tattoo community that the first couple that you get are very important to you.
Yeah.
And right, this is a quote that my grandfather told me on his deathbed, and I'm getting it right here. And this is why it's that important,
Yeah.
And
yeah,
then,
I only have
eventually-
one. I waited over 10 years to get it. And it was a big
right?
deal.
That's normal. That's normal, but then you get to tattoo 3 and 4, and you're just like, you know what? I can see how that's important. And then tattoos 5 and 6, you're just like, you know what? I really like giraffes today. And that's what happens, right? And so eventually, and it's funny because once again, I'm in education, and what I love is that no one I wear short sleeves all the time. I'm a college advisor. I'm an academic advisor, right? And so I don't have to teach. Even whenever I taught, I still had all these tattoos. And so it doesn't matter. No one cares. My principal is well, you know, Travis. But high schoolers, they want to know, oh my gosh, Mr. Hill, what's that? What about that one? What does that mean? And sometimes I'm on the spot and I'm like, well, I'm going to make up an answer for you. But really, it's just that it's cool.
But we don't tell the children that. That's funny. You don't.
Sometimes I do.
The district I went to high school in, I actually looked this up when I was getting mine because I thought about it. They forbid visible tattoos because they feel it's unprofessional, violation of dress code. My current district don't care at all, and I honestly think that makes more sense. Why would you care? I mean, first of all, times are changing, right? But also, unless it's something obscene or weird, it's not going to be anything except something that just connects the kids to you more. They want to know about you. They want to know about your life. Yeah. I think it's a bonus.
It is. I mean, the number of frank conversations that I get to have with students just based off of body art, and the kind of the immediate connections. I also work in a very low income school as well. I mean, we're sitting around, I think, somewhere between 78 to 82% of our student population is on free and reduced lunch.
Right.
And so because of the population, the economic population that we have, a lot of our kids have tattoos.
Yeah.
And they're grown up with family members who have tattoos, and so they just kind of look at me and go oh, you're just kind of like a normal guy with tattoos, but you're also in school. And then it kind of goes to show that hey, you can look like me and you can have all these body art and still be a responsible, respectable member of society. And that's a lot of different ways that I like to kind of interact with it. But to maintain my street cred, no board game tattoos yet.
Man, I don't have any street cred. My students think that I'm just the lamest. I think it's hilarious. I don't help them. I make all sorts of horrible puns and dad jokes. It's really my own fault. We're not gonna dwell on this long, but I feel like you should know. Rachel Barrett wants to know, has Travis had some coffee? Right there, evidence. So much coffee.
right there. There's about this much left. And I'm a coffee snob on top of everything else, right? So I do craft coffee. I do pour overs a couple times a day. I don't have a coffee machine. The only thing that is automated at this house in terms of coffee is the grinder, because we have a grinder, because I'm that person. So the funny thing is that this is actually just how I am, is really what it is. Whenever I do any type of talking or interviewing or whatever stuff, I just come across this way. and even without the coffee, I would still be just kind of a little ridiculous. So that's okay. Because what do we have to do? We have to entertain teenagers on a consistent basis.
Oh yeah, it's like having 5 matinees a day. What's interesting though is I'm actually an introvert. Most people don't think that when they meet me, because I just turn it on when I'm around other people. Yep. Then I go home and it's done.
Yeah. I'll be I'll totally crash after this.
Yeah. Like, I just leave it all on the field, and then, boom, I'm done.
I'm... Mm-hmm.
All right, rulebook question. Bonzoso21 asks, do you like separate rulebooks for multiplayer, solo, and quick reference, or one big book to rule them all?
I think it's dependent on the number of rules changes, right? So if there are minimal changes between the multiplayer and the solo game, then just make a section on it. Make a section for the solitaire rules, and then just leave it at that. But if there are significant changes, I think it's and over a lot of different places, you could have a separate rule book. I also like different player counts in line with the actual rules, and the reason for that is because there's nothing worse to me as a solo player of getting a rule book. And this isn't a rule book. This is a piece of paper.
It's an example. It's an example.
It's the Irish Gauge rules. I was using this for reference for something earlier. And this is all I got. But there's nothing worse than reading an entire rule book of 4, 8, 12, 16, 20 pages, and you realize that you can play this game solitaire, but to do so you have to reference this other page. And so you learn all of the rules for the multiplayer version of this game, and then what do you have to do? You have to learn additional rules on top of it just so that you can play it on your own. Yeah. And so for me, I'm a huge fan of inline rules that are like different colors. So I worked with Cat Quartet Games. They put out Gladius on Kickstarter, and we were trying to figure out where's the best place. So it's a bluffing game, right? And it's a 3 to 5 player bluffing game, but it has a 2-player variant. And so we had space in the rule book to put boxes specifically for 2 players, because there weren't a ton of changes in the rules, but there was enough. And so you had this whole page that was an entire setup for 3 to 5 players, a whole page that was an entire setup for 2 players, but then everything else was just rules. You get to step 3 of phase 2, and then instead of reading and trying to remember this rule, instead there's a small box that says 2-player, and it explains what it is. And so you don't even have to learn it until you're ready to learn the multiplayer version. And so if it doesn't change if the flow of the game hasn't changed, then definitely try and do things in line, if at all possible, unless it's just like a summary. You get to the back and it's like, in a 1-player game, you perform everything the same, except you set it up this way. Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah.
So it's hard because it is a case-by-case basis. It just depends on the density of the rules. And that's the hard thing about all this, is that a lot of people want to know, like, what's the rule for this? Or what do you think about this? And a lot of times it really is entirely just dependent on what the actual game is and how much changes throughout the course of the game, and in very different player counts and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing it is a pet peeve of mine too. Like, I mean, we deal with it because it's what we do, right? But it kind of does suck to have to learn the game twice to play it once. Like, in order to understand how solo is different, you have to understand the multiplayer game. But if you don't have anybody to try it out with, you got to figure out how to conceptually make it work, and then try the solo mode. That can be really rough.
And I mean, sometimes there's no way around it, you know, and that's okay. Now, I was thinking about this, but Space Core from G&T.
Ooh, I want to play that.
They did a fantastic job. Well, first of all, it's John Butterfield, right, who is just a solo war game master. But they did a fantastic job because there are 2 full-on separate rule books. One that's 2 to 4 player and one that's 1 player. And so, like, I've never read the multiplayer rules. I've only read the solo rules. But it's great because I know the whole game, and I know the solo rules. And if I ever need to learn it again for multiplayer, if we're ever able to play games with people in person ever again, then I'll spend the time and do that. But who knows? So
who knows? All right, different topic. Kabuki Kid. Hey, Kabuki Kid. She wants to know, what are some of your favorite authors/books?
What are books? No, I'm kidding.
That's a lie. You're a reader. I see your Twitter all the time.
I'm a reader. I do read a lot. Favorite books. So let's go. If we go classics first. If we go classics first, I like classic fantasy and sci-fi. So Isaac Asimov, Ursula K. Le Guin, Tolkien, obviously. Any of those classics are standbys. I love old French and Russian literature. My favorite book in the entire world is Les Mis. In 2012, the musical/movie came out. My wife is a big musical fan. I'm not. And so I decided we're going to see this movie. It comes out on December 24th. There are 30 days between now and December 24th. I can read this 1,465-page book if I read 50 pages a day for 30 days. And I did. And over 30 days, I read 50 pages a day, and I was on the last page of that book on the couch crying, just sobbing. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's this great story about redemption and grace and beauty and legacy. And I have a Les Mis tattoo. It's 24601.
Oh, hey!
Right? And so it's just like such, like, that's, like the classics are wonderful.
So my question is, how did you limit yourself to 50 pages a day? I read like a starving person. So basically I'll go too long without reading. And then I'll pick up a book and I'll just like hork through this. It's insane. Like, I'll be like, oh, let me read this series. And it's like, 2 days later, I show up and like come back out of my apartment.
Sure. Well, it was not the first Victor Hugo book that I've read, and I know that Hugo has a bad tendency of diving deep into stuff that nobody cares about. Diving deep into the history or the description of like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, right? There's like 200 pages about Notre Dame, which if you've never visited before, you're just kind of like, I don't understand. Okay, cool. Gargoyles. How many bell towers are there? I don't know, let's talk about the turrets some more. Just, whatever it is, and so all of that stuff's going on, right? And so I knew that with Hugo, because I had read a couple of his works before, but I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna do it. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't exactly 50 pages. It was just an average. Yeah. So there were some days that I read, 15 or 20, and then some days that I read 100, right? Because, I had a timeline to me, because I was sitting there, I had to see this movie, which was fine. It ended up being fine. But it was great for me because I knew so much more of the backstory. Yeah. And I was just like, that's what they're referencing. I'm like, they said 7 words, and it was 180 pages in the book. That's cool. But still, it was so fresh in my mind that I was able to do that. So those are the old ones, the classics. Contemporary wise, it's just kind of it's all across the board. My library is in the next room. This is obviously games, but library's right over there.
Scene change. No kidding.
It is a laptop, so I can. I guess I'm really once again, I love sci-fi and fantasy are kind of the things that I end up going to. I'm actually pulling up my Goodreads account to make sure that I'm safe.
We should be friends on Goodreads. I'll find you
later.
Should be.
Yes. Nnedi Okorafor, she did like the Binti series, the novellas, and Akata Witch and Akata Warrior, which is just great. Great jujuism is what they call it. It's what she calls it a lot of times on Twitter, and it's just magical. What was dumb is that it was billed as the West African Harry Potter, which is just trash. I hate that. I hate that comparison because it's not, and it's so different than that. But it's like, well, yeah, sure. Tomi Adeyemi did Children of Blood and Bone. Also,
that is so good.
It is, and at first, same thing. Oh, well, this is the African Harry Potter, and I was like, I thought that came out earlier. It's just all this stuff over and over again. And actually, that I'm.
But I love Children of Blood and Bone more. Really, it's not about I didn't want to be trapped in high school for that long. And Children of Blood and Bone doesn't make me be there.
Oh my god. Yeah. So I like that. S.A. Chakraborty.
Yes. I just downloaded Empire of Gold. I can't wait. Have you finished it? Is it good?
I don't know yet. It's coming in the mail. It should be here. My wife and I did a big bookshop order about 4 or 5 days ago, and so it should be here sometime soon. But yeah, I got the first one. I didn't touch it for a year. I read it around December, and then I got the second one, and then I read it in like a day and a half in June, and now I'm like, okay, I got to finish this book now. The series. So yeah, no, it should be coming. It should be coming soon. I think that's the last.
Oh yes, it is the last one.
Well, it's also the last big book that I'm reading before grad school hits in about a month. So it's like I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
Get that out of the way. So yeah, I mean, I like Josh Mallerman. He's the one who did Bird Box. He just came out with this Bird Box. Mallory. He has this one book called Inspection, which is just bizarre. I can't even talk about it. N.K. Jemisin. I really over the last 2 or 3 years, 3 years now, I've really tried to make a very dedicated space to read books that are by people of color and are people who are in the LGBTQ community, and that's just been and what's great is that
Priory of the Orange Tree. Did you read that one?
Oh, yeah,
that was good. Just so you know, we're dropping some fantasy recommendations of excellence here. Oh, also, Ken Liu, Grace of Kings. Have you read that one?
It is on the list.
It is so good. It's so good.
Did Ken Liu, is he the one who did the translation for Chin Liu for Three Body Problem?
I have no idea, but if he did, I want to see it because
want to see that. Ted Chiang, he wrote the short story The Arrival, the movie that came out a few years back.
Yeah.
He's just a fantastic collection of short stories that is just all this wonderful weird sci-fi stuff, but it's just it's anything he does is just gold. But yeah, I mean, just a lot of that stuff. My wife is a high school librarian. We actually work at the same school, which is wonderful. I know it's funny because we have the same last name, and it still takes like 6 months for kids to realize that we're married. Granted, we do work on the little opposite side of the school. My office and the library are on opposite ends.
Oh, I have an awkward story about that. So one of my colleagues, she's amazing. So she is the daughter of our department head. Okay. But people ask if they're married, and it's like, no. Oh. Because kids can't tell the relative ages of adults for some reason.
No, they can't. No, they can't. like kids all the time are just like, Mr. Hill, there's no way that you're like you might be 30, maybe. And I'm just like, you don't understand how time works. I'm just like, stop, whatever.
Oh, so one more question before you potentially fall back down the book rabbit hole, which is fine with me. I'll warn you, by the way, that if you do end up being my friend on Goodreads, I read everything. It's like a complete range. So you'll get like Kindle Unlimited, fantasy, romance, trash. It's so great. All the way up to like, I don't know.
It's okay, because I really only use Goodreads to track what I have read in the past. And just for me, more than anything, it's just for me to go, okay, I've read these books. And like I set like what is it, one of those competitions, read what.
Yeah, I broke my 100 book a year streak last year, and I was so crushed. I got to get back on that.
Well, I just tossed one on there just for the heck of it, but I always put like 20 or 30 books, and I always end up reading like 40 or 50 or 60 or just whatever it is, because I just don't care. I don't care. It's on there. I don't feel that I have to beat it or meet it necessarily. It's just that this is a nice goalpost for me to just get close to.
Yeah, I had a streak going though. That kind of broke my heart, to be real. But yes,
I would be miffed about that too. Don't worry.
Kabuki Kid wants to know, how deep does your coffee snobbery go? Is it civet? Is that how you pronounce it? Civet?
Civet coffee? No, it is not.
No poop coffee for you?
No, not at all. Not close. And part of it is because because civet coffee is also it kind of falls in that I don't want to say animal abuse, but to a degree it is. Is that caging animals and you're hyper feeding them, and it's just, in some instances, not 100% obviously, but also like, no, I can't. I spend enough time with coffee that I really just don't want to go that. I'm good with what I have.
That's awesome. I have no actual palate, I'm realizing. So, like, so when I drink any sort of caffeinated drink, I like iced lattes. I like espresso with a lot of milk in it. I don't really have, like, a palate. So I can't tell the difference between good coffee and bad coffee. And that extends to other beverages generally as well, that we won't talk about on the Dice Tower.
Fair. I have a pretty good palate. I am the person that can pick out tasting notes in coffee and other flavorful beverages for adults.
Yes.
I am that person that's like, oh, this does have blackberry. That's kind of popping out. Oh yeah, like I'm that person. I do it with coffee as well, but yeah, it is. I don't know. I don't train myself. I know some people that do because they're coffee people. They're just like, this has little bits of honey and nutmeg and a little bit of smoke. And I'm like, yes, it does. I can taste the honey and a little bit of smoke. Nutmeg? Nah, I don't know, y'all. It's okay.
Do you enjoy Coffee Roaster, the game?
Yes.
Do you feel like an extra special attachment to it because of your love of coffee? Yes, that's the pretty one.
Yeah, it was the only one. The only one. Sorry.
That's the one I have. So.
No. I mean, whenever Coffee Roaster came out, I was like, I have to own this. This is a thing that I have to own. I've been into craft coffee for I don't know, 8-9 years now or so. So now it's second nature. And it was funny because my wife is a really big coffee person, and so for me, the decision was, whenever I first started getting into craft coffee, she said, okay, we can do this, but you have to make the coffee in the mornings every morning, because I'm a morning person. Like the alarm goes off at 5:30 and I'm up and I'm going and I'm tweeting and I'm sending emails and I'm reading and I'm wide awake for the most part. My wife, on the other hand, the alarm goes off at 5:15, 5:30, 6, whatever. And so she's not cognizant enough to actually make coffee. So for me, it's just a ritual now. And I love it, so that helps. That helps a lot.
Yeah, I'm an early bird too. I like to be up early. I've been waking up too early the last few days. It's like when you go back into a school year, you have to re-regulate your body. Like, when do I go to bed? When do I get up? It's like past my bedtime right now because it's not summer anymore.
Yeah, right. Today was the first day that my wife came into work, because I do academic counseling. I've been there for a week already.
Yeah.
But today was the first day for her to be like, I have to get dressed at 6:30. I'm like, yes, we do.
My cats knew the rhythm because it'd been a while, but they recognized what I was doing after all those months of working from home, and the looks of betrayal I got.
Oh yeah,
I'm in trouble.
We realized this was the first time that our dog had been in his kennel for the full day since the beginning of March. And it was just kind of like, oh, I hope he's okay. Which all he does is just lay on his back and sleep all day. But still, we're like, I hope he's fine.
Oh, yeah, I wish that, so allergies aside, and badly trained animals aside, it would be so nice to be able to just take animals with you places. So my cat Harley would not want to leave the house. She's really a shut-in. She's like me. But I have a cat named Kato who's not afraid of anything or anybody, and I'm fairly certain that I could put that cat on a harness and just take him around, and he would not care. But I can't. It's a shame. Alright, so Kabuki Kid has a question for us. She wants to know, what was your introduction to RPGs? Was it D&D or something else?
I've never played D&D.
Oh my gosh, you're like that person who's never watched Game of Thrones, or that person who hasn't seen Star Wars, or...
I haven't watched Game of Thrones.
Oh.
I tried to read the first book 3 times and made it about halfway through.
I would say the book three is the best book. So
yeah, but I'm also a big fan of, if I don't like something, I'm not going to complete it.
And I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, and it's funny because there are people. My wife is a completionist, and so she's like, if I'm 200 pages into a 400 or 600 page book, I got to finish it. And I'm like, I don't have time for that. I'm going to put this book down, and I'm just going to pick up something else. I'll give it a shot, and I'll try again, but still. So I am that person, in fact. But I have seen Star Wars. I've seen all of them, in fact. So all that being said, like RPGs are just super weird because I didn't get into them until maybe just a couple of years ago, and all of the ones that I got into were just like strange, like one-shot things. So Avery Alder is the designer for The Quiet Year, which The Quiet Year is just one of the most brilliant games that I've ever played. It is a map drawing game that is dependent on a deck of cards, and you all play. Every person plays the role of somebody in this society that has been like taken over by monsters and external forces, and you kind of really don't know what it is, but they've gone away, and you have this year of peace. And so throughout this year, you all take turns, and you're like exploring the area around you, and you're like building stuff as a community. And it's such a beautiful game that was the first thing that got me into RPGs, that really made me start going, man, this can be so much more and about so much more, and have people work on themselves and work through their own stuff so much more than just I'm an orc and I cast a fireball. Which I don't know if orcs cast fireballs, probably not, but wizards do. So
why not?
Why not? In D&D, apparently you can do whatever you want. So, but all that being said, it's funny because the games that I make are very different because I don't have that background. I don't want to spend 45 minutes creating a character. I just don't. I don't want to have a game master playing the game with me. I don't need somebody to run it. I want it to be self-contained. Now, if somebody just kind of has to run it because they know all the rules, sure, of course, but it doesn't need to be let me check what it says on this chart for here, and I'm just not a fan of that. And so that's why I fall into games like The Quiet Year. Dialect from Thorny Games is just so incredible. You would enjoy it a lot as well. It's about language and how language evolves. It's about how language evolves and changes over time. You create you're part of this you're part of this community. There's a little bit of character creation, but it's not like +3 dexterity, but it's this little bit of this character creation, and while you're in it, you're creating this community, and in this community you come up with words and phrases that work and interact with this community that you've built, and then over time you're playing ages and ages of this community's growth, and so words fall away and words disappear and they change and they alter as time goes on, and it's just such a really interesting thing that happens.
That sounds cool. So I ordered something like 3 weeks ago that finally came that I'm excited about, and that would be 1,000-Year-Old Vampire.
Oh yeah,
I saw the review on Shut Up and Sit Down, and I was like, this box is really good.
This box right here is all RPGs, is what it's. And actually, at the very top, wait for it, that's right, 1,000-Year-Old Vampire.
Yeah, I had to have the physical book because it just looks so cool.
Oh yeah, it is gorgeous, and Tim Hutchins, he did such a great job with this, and he just won a bunch of Ennies, a bunch of awards for it, too. And so yeah, it's cool. It's some fun stuff in there.
I'm excited to try it.
Good. Yeah, I'm going to sit down with like a special journal, because solitaire journaling games have been kind of like a really big thing that has shown up a lot in RPGs recently. And so I kind of want to just get like a single journal that I just write everything down in over time.
I'm super curious about it because it's not something that I've really delved into before. I mean, I've played Four Against Darkness, and I've done a little bit of solo like RPGs. You would think about it, but this writing aspect of it is really cool. And I've played Quill, and I really liked that as an experience. So,
yeah, one of the RPGs in the compilation is Letters from a Bookbinder, and it's based off of this kind of like solo journaling system. And really, you have a deck of cards, and you have a die, which is a randomizer, and then you just have a journal. And there are always different kind of flavors of this. Mine is you play an aging bookbinder, and you find so much fun and joy in the stories of the books that you're piecing together that you care less about actually binding the books and more about sharing the stories with your friend. And so the entire point is that you actually these cards correlate to specific stuff, and you flip over X number of cards, and those are the different books, and the cards correlate to different themes. Like some of them are characters and locations, and the whole thing is that you're so excited to share this with your friend that what you're doing is writing a letter to your friend that is explaining the synopses of these books. And so it's just like people that like creative stuff and are just like dorky book people like us. It's just fun because you're like, Dear Ambrose, yesterday I began reading blah 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 blah. And a lot of journaling games are interesting because people think that you have to get an actual journal and do it, but a lot of people just do it online because it's just quicker and of thought and whatever. I like to, depending on what it is, I like to do one or the other. But these journaling games are just way fun though because they're relaxing for the most part. Just depending on what the concept is,
Oh, here's a question. Kabuki Kid wants to know, what is your favorite video game implementation of an RPG?
I actually don't play a ton of video games, and it's nothing against video games. It's just really kind of like it's time. Whenever I think of my entertainment value, I find more personal satisfaction from reading, or playing a solo game, or sometimes it's just like game design, or I'm like editing a rulebook. And so because of that, like video games don't happen a ton in this house. My wife plays a ton of video games. She is currently, at the beginning of this year in January, she decided that she wanted to play every single Legend of Zelda title in chronological order.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, she is halfway through Twilight Princess right now. And so she's knocking it out, and she's played about half of them before. And so now some of it is just a recap. It's like, she's like Skyward Sword, and she's like, I played that just a couple years ago. I'm just going to do like a speed run. I'm like, that's a good idea, because then she wants to spend, like my wife's the type of person that spent 190 hours on Breath of the Wild just exploring, because that's just what she does. She loves stuff,
When I have time, I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that is also the only thing that she did for 6 months outside of work. And so, so there's not a whole lot of video games that happen over here. So all that being said, I don't really have a good RPG implementation, a video game implementation of an RPG.
That's fair. For me, I actually don't necessarily want to play video game versions of board games. I like RPGs that are designed to be played as video games. That's what they're for. So I actually love tactical stuff. Like Final Fantasy Tactics is probably one of my top 5 games of all time. I loved it. I love Skyrim. Ocarina of Time I loved. That's not really an RPG, but just such a good game. So we'll just mention it.
As you should.
And then, so we're getting towards the end. So let's talk about this frivolous question to end with, which I like. So Bunza21 wants to know, best seasonal candy.
Best seasonal candy?
Yeah, what's your favorite seasonal candy? Because why not?
Reese's Peanut Butter Cup Christmas trees, because they don't look like Christmas trees. And so it's just your Reese's Peanut Butter Cup in a larger blob.
See, those don't do it for me because they don't have the right chocolate to peanut butter ratio. I need more chocolate. Like, for me, the best part of the Reese's is where the chocolate's a little bit thicker right around that top edge.
Sure. I get that. Yeah, no. For me, if the ratio was inverted and it was just like 90% peanut butter and 10% chocolate, I would be just fine with that too.
Interesting. See, my favorite seasonal candy is actually also holiday, but basically I like all those mint chocolates. Like I love peppermint bark.
Sure.
Anything, all those sort of anything that's a chocolate that is infused with mint is really my thing.
I can't do that. I don't like it. Two competing flavors that
are perfectly complementary, delicious.
That's for some people. Yes, it is. I'm just glad you didn't say Peeps or candy corn.
Oh no! Actually, I was gonna say I'm gonna be controversial and hate on candy corn so hard.
Oh yeah, no, it's utter trash. Yeah, no one needs to eat that mess. And Peeps, no, no. And I know lots of people that are just like, oh my gosh, Peeps are available now, and I'm just like, throw that in the.
No, the only thing Peeps are good for is having jousting contests in the microwave. Like you put like a little toothpick in each one and like heat them up and see which one will pop the other one first.
Yeah, see, that's perfect.
I had an exciting childhood.
No shame whatsoever in what you find joy in.
Absolutely.
Especially if it's blowing up Peeps.
Right? I think this is a great place, given it's 10 o'clock, to end this conversation. So, thank you so much, everyone, for coming and hanging out with us. We appreciate it. And Kabuki Kid, no love for sweethearts. Ugh. Love you, though.
Out of like 1 to 10, I would give sweethearts like a 4. Like Oof. That has to be like there has to be. I like sweet stuff, but there has to be like a supreme shortage for me to go there. Not Peeps. If it's Peeps or nothing, it's nothing. But occasionally I'm just like, I'll take half. But it has to be the big ones, right? Those big old sweethearts, right? Like the large.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right. So where there was like a big pack of them, and they're like 3. I could do those, but only like 1, because then that's a little too much.
See, chocolate forever, and peanut butter.
Oh yeah, sure.
Night, everybody.
Bye. Thanks.